Hello everyone, and welcome to my Soap Twist 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The light shone through the Forrester mansion's elaborate stained glass windows, creating multicolored patterns over the marble flooring as visitors milled around in formal clothing. It was meant to be the perfect day, Ridge Forrester and Brooke Logan's wedding, which had been delayed, disturbed, and fantasized about for decades. The air was thick with the aroma of fresh roses and lilies, arrangements towering in every room, symbols of enduring love notwithstanding the upheaval that seemed to surround the Logan and Forrester families. Brooke stood at the altar in a stunning ivory silk gown designed by Eric himself years ago and updated for this momentous occasion, her golden hair cascading in soft waves, her eyes shining with a mix of joy and lingering anxiety, knowing their love story would never be simple for long. Ridge looked dashing in his fitted tuxedo, his distinctive beard perfectly kept, and a smile spread across his lips as he looked at her. The patriarch, Eric Forrester, sat in the front row, his presence a godsend. His health had improved just enough in recent months to allow him to see this. He had always believed in Ridge and Brooke's fate, reminding his son that no matter how many twists and turns life took, Brooke was the one who held his heart. The officiant, a close family friend, began the vows, and the room fell hushed as Ridge said the words that would bond them once more. "I, Ridge, take you, Brooke, to be my lawfully wedded wife." But as Brooke opened her mouth to repeat the commitment, the giant double doors at the back of the vast hall slammed open with a thunderous thud. Gasps echoed throughout the crowd. Uniformed police officers stormed in, commanded by a stern lieutenant familiar with the Forresters' dramas. "Ridge Forrester," the lieutenant exclaimed, his voice bouncing off the lofty ceilings. "You are under arrest for fraud and embezzlement related to Forrester Creations' financial irregularities." The air was choppy. Steffi rose to her feet, her face paling as she said, "This can't be happening. Dad, what's going on?" Thomas, ever protective, stood beside her, gazing at the cops as if his gaze alone might deter them. Hope grasped Liam's arm, her eyes wide with surprise, as Bill Spencer chuckled from his seat, albeit he too seemed astonished by the time. The allegations stemmed from old dealings, shady investments Ridge approved during a turbulent period when he was attempting to save the company from bankruptcy, deals that had recently come under scrutiny as a result of an anonymous tip, rumored to be from a disgruntled former employee with ties to the Spencers. Ridge's face drained of color as the officers reached the altar. He lifted his hands instinctively to plead his innocence. "This is a mistake. Today of all days? Brooke, I swear I didn't," but the cuffs snapped over his wrists before he could finish. The guests mumbled in surprise, their phones quietly pulled out to catch the controversy that would dominate headlines tomorrow. Brooke's bouquet slid from her shaky hands, leaving petals scattered across the altar steps like fallen dreams. Tears welled up in her eyes as she watched the man she loved being dragged away, the wedding vows left incomplete in the air. "No. You can't do this," Brooke said, running forward, her robe trailing after her in a desperate plea. She reached for the lieutenant's arm, her voice breaking. "Please, this is our wedding day. Whatever it is, it can wait. Ridge is innocent. He's the heart of Forrester Creations." The cops softly but firmly pulled her back, one apologizing for the intrusion but stressing the warrant was real and immediate. Brooke's world swirled. She spun wildly, scanning the faces in the crowd for assistance, until her gaze fell on Eric. He was already standing from his seat, aided by Donna, his face a mix of rage and resolve. The grandfather, who had created an empire on sketches and sheer will, would not let this happen. Brooke lurched down the aisle towards him, her shoes clicking wildly on the floor. Eric, please, you have to do something. They can't take him like this." Eric met her halfway, wrapping his muscular arms around her in a fatherly hug as she dropped against him, weeping uncontrollably. The guests stared in stunned silence as the beautiful ceremony turned into a nightmare. "Sure, my dear," Eric said quietly, his voice firm despite the tremor in his palms. "We'll fix this. Ridge is my son. He's not going anywhere permanently." But even as he said that, his eyes blazed with rage at the exiting officers, who were now carrying Ridge through the doors amid flashes from photographers outside. Brooke backed away slightly, her makeup ruined with tears, holding Eric's lapels. "Beg them, Eric. Beg the police. Call your lawyers. Pull whatever strings you have. He's innocent. This is some setup, I know it. Bill or Sheila, someone did this to ruin us." Her voice raised in desperation, mirroring how many times their happiness had been wrecked before. Eric nodded grimly, bringing out his phone with one hand and resting the other on her shoulder. "I'll call the best attorneys in the state. Lieutenant Baker owes me a favor from years ago. We'll get Ridge out on bail tonight." The house felt hollow as police sirens wailed in the distance. Steffi and Thomas went to their grandfather, demanding explanations, while Hope consoled Brooke, assuring that everything would be fine. Brooke couldn't stop shivering. She dropped onto a chair, staring at the altar, where eternal love had seemed possible just moments before. Eric sat next to her, his presence like a rock in the storm. "Brooke, listen to me," he urged firmly, grasping her hands. "Ridge has been through worse. Remember the times he was presumed dead, or the scandals that tried to tear us apart. This is just another hurdle. You're his destiny, and no bogus arrest is going to change that." She glanced at him through clouded eyes, appreciation mixed with anguish.
"Thank you, Eric.
"You're the only one who always believes in us." He gripped her hands tightly. "Because I know true love when I see it. Now, dry those tears. We have a son to rescue." The afternoon turned into a whirlwind of phone calls and legal procedures. Eric did his magic, contacting judges and pulling connections that spanned decades in Los Angeles high society. Donna prepared strong coffee for everyone, keeping the family together while they waited for news. Steffi paced, blaming Brooke indirectly for the ill karma that seemed to accompany their unions, but Thomas cut her off with a harsh look. Today wasn't the day for old grudges. Ridge was freed on bail hours later. As dusk fell over the estate, the charges were pending additional investigation, but he was not considered an immediate flight risk. He returned to the mansion unkempt, his tuxedo rumpled, but his eyes brightened as he noticed Brooke waiting at the entrance. She dashed up to him, wrapping her arms around his neck and crying again. "Ridge! Oh God, I thought I'd lost you forever." He hugged her tightly, taking in her familiar aroma. "Never, Logan. Not even handcuffs can keep me away from you." Eric approached, patting his son on the back. "Welcome home, son. We'll fight this together, as a family." The wedding had been wrecked, the guests had left, and tales about the dramatic interruption had spread like wildfire. But in that moment, amidst the scattered flowers and overturned chairs, Brooke and Ridge exchanged a kiss that felt more binding than any promise. Eric smiled, knowing that their love would withstand yet another test. The fight against the bogus charges loomed, but with Eric's insight and the family's unity, they would win. Still, shadows lingered. Who had tipped off the authorities at the worst possible moment? Suspicions were cast on old foes, and as the night progressed, Brooke swore to discover the truth. Ridge, clutching her hand, vowed the same thing. Their wedding may have been cut short, but their story was far from over. Eric, the constant guiding force, reminded them that the bold and the beautiful world of fashion and passion always allowed for redemption and vengeance. The next few days were a haze of legal consults and family meetings. Brooke could barely sleep, plagued by the vision of Ridge in shackles. She clung to him more than ever, their nights filled with whispered reassurances and plans for a more intimate ceremony once the cloud lifted. Eric took charge, employing elite investigators to track down the anonymous tip, believing it was sabotage. "No one messes with my family on such a sacred day," he vowed over supper, his voice full of the authority that had founded Forrester Creations. Steffi and Finn offered their support, but Steffi couldn't hide her relief that the wedding had been canceled. Her allegiance to Taylor's memory remained strong. Meanwhile, Thomas went through corporate papers, desperate to prove his father's innocence. Hope and Liam postponed their own celebrations, rallying around Brooke like any real sister would. As evidence of modified documents, likely planted, grew, the charges began to unravel. The true culprit emerged, a vengeful ex-executive with Spencer ties, seeking retribution for a previous termination. Bill denied involvement, but the animosity between him and Ridge flared again. Finally, weeks later, the accusations were dropped. Ridge and Brooke reaffirmed their vows in a secret garden ceremony attended solely by family members, with Eric's blessing. There are no interruptions this time. Brooke looked Ridge in the eyes, her voice steady. Through arrests and accusations, my heart is yours. Ridge smiled, and mine is yours forever. Eric beamed, toasting to destiny. The drama had only strengthened them, demonstrating once more that in the world of the bold and the beautiful, love conquered all, even handcuffs at the altar. The sun shone through the large stained-glass windows, casting beautiful colors across the polished floor as guests took their places. A calm excitement permeated the air, the type that comes with long-anticipated vows and unsolved history. This wedding was supposed to be a moment of healing after years of betrayal, heartache, and second chances. Despite the silk gowns, tailored suits, and meticulously polished grins, anxiety coiled like a secret tempest. No one realized how spectacularly the day was about to unfold. Ridge stood at the altar with a confident posture, but a concerned expression. He adjusted his jacket slightly, more out of habit than necessity, and looked around the room. Familiar faces peered back at him. Family, friends, enemies, and former loves. Each had their own memories of him, some warm, some piercing with resentment. Today was supposed to be a watershed moment, a declaration that the chaos of the past was finally over. Still, an unpleasant sensation weighed upon his chest, as if fate were holding its breath. Brooke sat in the front, her gaze fixed on Ridge. Her heart ached in ways she couldn't fully express, even to herself. She had convinced herself she was prepared for this day, that she supported the relationship, and that she had come to terms with her role in his life. But as she watched him stand there, memories poured back, shared laughter, whispered promises, painful betrayals, and reunions that felt like miracles until they weren't. She put her hands together, silently reminding herself to be calm. Eric sat a few rows behind Brooke, his eyes attentive and filled with concern. As the family patriarch, he had witnessed love flowering, dying, and resurrecting just to disintegrate again. He had supported the wedding because he believed that everyone deserved to be happy. However, something about the environment bothered him. Perhaps it was the way Ridge's gaze darted across the room, or Brooke appeared to be holding back tears. Eric had learnt to trust his instincts, and they were now whispering warnings that he did not want to hear. The music grew louder, indicating the next step of the ceremony. Guests turned in their seats, excitement on their faces. Just as the officiant was about to speak, the doors in the back of the room flew open. The unexpected noise reverberated across the space, piercing through the music like a blade. Murmurs echoed through the audience as heads swung around. Uniformed officers entered, their presence harsh and contrasted with the grandeur of the environment. For a minute, no one moved. The air became thick with uncertainty and disbelief, spreading as swiftly as dread. Ridge turned slowly, his jaw tightening as he took in the surroundings. Even before the cop said his name, his senses told him what was going on. They approached the altar in steady strides, their expressions professional and unwavering. One of them spoke to Ridge immediately, his voice calm but stern. Words like arrest and warrant appeared to reverberate forever, bouncing from the walls and settling into every heart present. Guests gasped. Someone dropped a program. The music abruptly ended, leaving an awful quiet. Brooke jumped to her feet, her heart hammering so loudly that she was certain everyone could hear it. "No," she said quietly at first, then louder, desperation consuming her. She pushed past the folks sat next to her and went to the altar. Her gaze sought Ridge's face for reassurance, denial, or anything that would convince her that this was not occurring. Ridge seemed surprised, with fury and astonishment flashing across his features. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words emerged. The gravity of the situation pressed down on him, crushing and harsh. He was aware that trouble was never far away, but he had not expected it to find him here, on what was meant to be one of the most crucial days of his life. Brooke quickly approached Ridge and stood between him and the officers. Her voice trembled as she begged, not just the cops, but the universe itself. She claimed that there must have been an error, that this could not be occurring now, not here. Tears flowed down her cheeks as she gripped Ridge's arm and refused to let go. Eric slowly stood from his seat, his face a mix of bewilderment and determination. He came closer, putting himself next to Brooke. His presence was dominating, and his voice remained firm amidst the turmoil. He sought an explanation, reminding everyone in attendance that this was a family affair, a holy event being tainted by unanswered charges. The officer outlined the charges, each syllable striking like a hammer blow. Whispers erupted across the room as people exchanged stunned expressions. Some shook their heads in bewilderment, while others observed with a barely veiled condemnation. Years of scandals had taught them that no celebration was ever safe from tragedy, but seeing it happen in real time was a totally different experience. Brooke turned to face Eric, her eyes wide with dread and hope. She implored him to take action, to use his power, his resources, anything to put an end to this. Her voice broke as she spoke, genuine emotions seeping forth in ways she could no longer contain. She was fighting not only for Ridge, but also against the predictable cycle of loss that had plagued her life for so long. Eric rested a hand on Brooke's shoulder, his touch firm yet heavy with sadness. He pledged to do everything in his power, but even as he spoke, he realized there were limitations. Some wars cannot be won with money or contacts. Some repercussions had to be addressed head-on. Ridge finally found his voice and insisted on his innocence. He looked at Brooke, then at Eric, and silently apologized for dragging them into yet another maelstrom. His pride clashed with his terror as the officers prepared to lead him out. The humiliation of being let out handcuffed in front of everyone he knew was almost unbearable. Brooke broke down totally, sobbing openly while clinging to him. She whispered promises, reassurances, and urgent words of love, as if time was rushing away. She informed him she trusted in him and would not desert him, no matter what occurred next. Her voice trembled as she urged him not to give up hope. The visitors watched in stunned silence as Ridge was carried away, the doors closing behind him with finality that rang throughout the room. What started as a celebration ended in catastrophe. The shrine stood abandoned, with flowers dying beneath the weight of unmet promises. Brooke collapsed to the floor, her strength failing. Eric knelt beside her and held her while she cried. He felt the old sorrow of witnessing his family shatter once more, powerless to stop the pain despite his years of experience. People slowly began to leave, unsure what to say or do. As the room cleared, the reality of what had happened became clear. The wedding had ended before it had properly begun, leaving behind uncertainty and fear. Brooke's thoughts was filled with questions, worst-case scenarios, and frightening memories of previous heartbreaks. She wondered how many times a heart could be broken before it stopped healing. Eric pulled Brooke to her feet and led her gently to the exit. He comforted her that this was not the end, and that the truth, no matter how buried, would eventually surface. Nonetheless, his eyes showed his concern. He knew the path ahead would be long and difficult, with legal fights and emotional repercussions. Ridge was alone in a holding room, the events playing out in his thoughts in an endless loop. The sight of Brooke's tear-stained face tormented him, driving both his determination and guilt. He determined to battle not only for himself, but also for others he cared about, even if it meant weathering unending storms. The day that was supposed to represent togetherness and renewal had instead revealed old wounds and created new ones. Despite the damage, tiny threads of devotion and affection survived. Brooke's unflinching faith, Eric's constant support, and Ridge's determination laid the groundwork for a long-fought battle. What happened next would put every bond to the test, call every truth into question, and push each of them to face the implications of their previous decisions. In a world where love and betrayal went hand in hand, this arrest was more than simply a stunning interruption. It was the start of another chapter in a story that refused to end easy.